The music stopped making sense the moment Claire Bennett's name was called to the dance floor. She had been standing near the bar, holding a glass of wine she hadn't touched in 20 minutes, watching her assistant's wedding unfold the way she watched everything now, from the edge of the room. Then Ivy Ashworth, glowing in white, grabbed her hand and pulled her into the open space where the guests were dancing, laughing, calling her name like this was a gift instead of a trap. Claire's feet stopped working. It wasn't shyness. People who didn't know her thought it was shyness, the cool boss finally letting her hair down, a little awkward, a little stiff. The people who worked under her every day knew better, but even they didn't know the real shape of it. The real shape of it was a hand on her waist 3 years ago, a song just like this one, and a man walking out the door before the second chorus ended. The band kept playing, the circle of guests kept clapping. Claire stood in the middle of it with her arms pinned to her sides, her breath going thin and high in her chest, and for a few seconds she was not at a wedding at all. She was somewhere colder. Cole Hendricks crossed the room before he decided to. He worked under her at the firm, 3 years now, long enough to know the difference between her quiet and her panic, even if nobody had ever taught him the difference on purpose. He just knew. He set his drink down on the nearest table and walked through the clapping circle like he had every right to be there, took her hand like it was the most normal thing in the world, and turned her into him. "Bad song anyway," he said, low enough that only she could hear it. Claire blinked at him. For a second her whole face was somewhere else, somewhere far past the lights and the cake table and the DJ booth, and then it came back, piece by piece, like a window defrosting. "It's a wedding classic," she said. Her voice came out thinner than she meant it to. "It's 4 minutes of the same chord," Cole said, and started moving her in a slow, deliberately clumsy circle that had nothing to do with the actual steps anyone else was doing. "Watch. I'm going to step on your foot in about 3 seconds." He did, on purpose, badly, the way a man does when he wants someone to laugh instead of cry in front of 40 coworkers. Claire let out a short, surprised sound that wasn't quite a laugh yet, but was close enough. "You're terrible at this," she said. "I'm spectacular at this. You're just used to dancing with people who know what they're doing. Is that an insult to my taste in partners? It's an insult to everyone you've ever danced with, including yourself, right now, currently." That got the real laugh out of her, short and surprised, like it had escaped before she gave it permission. The office watched from the edges of the floor, and a few of them exchanged glances, because nobody had seen Ice Marin. That was the name they used when they thought she couldn't hear it. Laugh like that in the 4 years she'd run the place. For a few minutes it was just bad dancing and worse jokes. Cole spun her once, too fast, and caught her when she stumbled, and her hand landed flat against his chest for balance. It stayed there a half-second longer than balance required. Neither of them said anything about it. The song rolled into its last chorus, the kind that always made brides cry and grooms pretend they weren't also crying, and Claire's hand slid off Cole's chest like she'd only just noticed it was there. "Thank you," she said, formal again, the way she got formal when something had gotten too close. "That was kind of you." "It was self-defense," Cole said. "I couldn't watch you stand there like a tax audit for 1 more second." She almost smiled at that. Almost. Then Dana from the front desk called her name about the seating chart, and Claire turned and walked off the floor with her shoulders pulled back up to their usual height, like a door closing. Cole stood there a moment longer, watching her go, and told himself it didn't mean anything. It was a lie he was getting good at telling. The firm Claire ran had her father's name carved into the glass at the entrance, even though her father had been dead for 3 years, and the company had been entirely hers since the week of his funeral. Bennett and Associates. People who'd worked there under Edmund Bennett still sometimes called her the new owner, like 4 years could be considered new, like she hadn't redesigned half the building, hired a third of the staff, and kept the lights on through a year when half the city's architecture firms went under. She'd done all of it without raising her voice once. That was the thing people said about her. In the break room, in the parking garage, in the kind of conversations that stopped the second she walked in. Ice Marin never raises her voice. Ice Marin never cries. Ice Marin fired 3 people in 1 week last spring and didn't blink. What they didn't know was that the week she fired those 3 people was the same week her divorce finalized. What they didn't know was that her father had died on a Tuesday in March, and she'd been back at her desk by Thursday, because grief, in her experience, was something other people got to have. She had a company with 40 employees, and their mortgages depending on her not falling apart in public. So she didn't. Cole had figured most of this out slowly, the way you figure out the shape of a room in the dark, by bumping into the same things twice. He noticed she took her coffee black after 2 in the afternoon, and milky before, and he never asked why. He just started bringing it that way without comment. He noticed she kept a photo of her father turned face down in the bottom drawer of her desk, not thrown away, just turned over, like she wasn't ready to look at it but wasn't ready to lose it either. He noticed she flinched, just barely, every single time someone mentioned a coworker leaving for a better offer somewhere else. He filed all of it away without understanding what he was building. He just knew that somewhere in the last 3 years, his attention to her had stopped being about being a good employee. After the wedding, he drove home with the windows down even though it was cold, because the heat in his chest needed somewhere to go. He kept replaying the half-second her hand had stayed on him. He told himself it was nothing. He believed it for almost an entire week. Monday morning, Claire was back behind her desk at 7, 2 hours before anyone else, the way she always was. The photo in the bottom drawer stayed face down. The wedding wasn't mentioned. When Cole brought her coffee at 9, black, because it was past 2 somewhere, even if it wasn't here, she thanked him, without looking up from her screen, and neither of them said a single word about the dance floor. But she kept the song stuck in her head for 3 days, and she hated herself a little for it. And somewhere underneath the hating, in a part of herself she did not let out very often, she was glad someone had finally crossed a room for her without being asked. She just had no idea yet how much that crossing was going to cost her. Liam Carter, who sat 2 desks down from Cole and considered himself an expert on office politics, despite being wrong about nearly all of it, noticed the shift first. He noticed the way Cole's eyes tracked Claire's office door when she was in a meeting, the way his pen stopped moving when her voice carried through the wall. "You're doing the thing again," Liam said one afternoon, dropping a stack of permit drawings on Cole's desk. "What thing?" "The thing where you watch the boss's door like it owes you money." Cole didn't look up from his screen. "I'm reviewing structural loads. You've been reviewing the same load calculation for 40 minutes, and it's a 2-minute job." Cole closed the file. He didn't have a good answer, so he gave Liam a look that was supposed to end the conversation, and mostly did. Except Liam grinned like a man who had just confirmed something he'd suspected for a year. "Just saying," Liam said, walking off. "Careful with that one. She doesn't let people in. I've seen 3 guys try." Cole wanted to say it wasn't like that. He wanted to say he wasn't trying to get in anywhere. He was just paying attention, the way you pay attention to weather before you decide whether to bring an umbrella. But even he didn't fully believe that anymore. Not since the wedding. Not since the half-second her hand had stayed against his chest, like it had forgotten the rest of her wanted to pull away. He went back to the load calculation. It still took him 40 more minutes. That same week, Claire sat in her office long after everyone else had gone home, the city outside her window turning the color of a bruise as the sun dropped behind the parking structure across the street. She had the firm's annual numbers open on one screen and her email open on the other, and she was not, technically, looking at either of them. She was looking at the framed photo on her desk of the building her father had designed in 1986, the one that had put Bennett and Associates on the map before she was even born. She thought about the dance floor more than she wanted to admit. She thought about how easy it had felt to let someone else lead for 90 seconds, after 4 years of leading everything herself, every meeting, every layoff, every late night closing out a project that should have had 2 more people on it. She thought about how frightening that ease had felt, the way a warm room feels frightening to someone who has spent a long time learning to live in the cold. She closed both screens and went home before she let herself think about it any longer than that. What she did not know, not yet, was that 2 buildings over, in an office with a view of the same skyline, a man named Owen Pratt had already pulled up Cole's portfolio on his screen and circled his name in red. She did not know it yet, but the clock on it had already started. Owen Pratt ran recruitment for Halcyon Design, a firm 2 buildings over, that had been quietly eating market share from Bennett and Associates for the better part of a year. He didn't do this job by accident or by luck. He did it by watching people the way other men watched stock tickers, looking for the ones who were underpaid for what they were worth and didn't fully know it yet. Cole Hendricks fit the pattern perfectly. Senior drafter, 4 years of work that should have come with a senior title and didn't. a portfolio Owen had pulled from a public design awards page that made him sit forward in his chair the first time he saw it. Owen sent the first message on a Tuesday morning. Casual, low pressure, the kind of message designed to look like nothing and feel like everything once you reread it 3 times. I came across your work on the Ash Grove Library renewal. We should talk sometime. No pressure, just coffee. Cole read it standing in line at the coffee shop downstairs from his own office, and he almost deleted it. He almost deleted it the way you almost throw away a lottery ticket before checking the numbers, telling yourself it's nothing, while your thumb hovers a half-inch from doing exactly that. He didn't delete it. He put his phone in his pocket and carried the message around with him for 3 days like a stone in his shoe, small enough to ignore most of the time, sharp enough to notice every time he shifted his weight. In that same stretch of days, the office kept moving the way it always moved. There was a client presentation for a mixed-use development downtown, and Claire ran the room the way she ran every room, calm, precise, 2 steps ahead of every question before it was asked. Cole sat at the far end of the table with the renderings he'd built laid into 3 separate nights, and he watched her sell his work to a panel of investors like she'd drawn every line of it herself, except she didn't take credit for a single piece of it. These details, she said, pointing to the building's south facade, the brickwork pattern Cole had spent 2 nights getting exactly right, came from Cole Hendricks, who I'd put up against anyone twice his experience. The investors nodded. One of them wrote something down. Cole felt his ears go warm and looked very intently at his own copy of the drawings until the moment passed. After the meeting, walking back to his desk, Claire caught up to him in the hallway. "That was good work," she said. "The brickwork pattern especially. It's the kind of thing that wins awards and nobody ever notices, unless someone points at it. You pointed at it. I point at things that deserve it." She said it simply, without performance, the way she said most things, and then added, almost like an afterthought, almost like she hadn't meant to say it out loud, "You've gotten better every year you've been here. I should tell you that more." It was such a small thing, 11 words, maybe 12, delivered in a hallway between a conference room and a copy machine. But Cole carried it around the rest of the day the same way he was carrying Owen Pratt's message, except this one didn't feel like a stone. This one felt like something he didn't have a name for yet, warm and a little dangerous, the kind of warmth that made the stone in his other pocket heavier by comparison. He didn't respond to Owen that week. He told himself it was because he was busy. It was half true. The mixed-use project ran long, the kind of long that ate weekends, and Cole found himself in the office on a Saturday afternoon when he should have been anywhere else, working through a structural revision that the engineer had flagged that morning. Claire was there too. She was almost always there on weekends, though she'd never said it out loud and nobody had ever pointed it out to her, the way you don't point out a habit to someone you suspect is using it to avoid something else. Around 4 in the afternoon, she came out of her office holding 2 mugs of coffee and set one down on the corner of his desk without being asked. His, black, because it was past 2. "You don't have to be here," she said. "Neither do you. I own the company, different math. I'm trying to get the column spacing right before Monday. The engineer's going to flag it again if I don't." Claire pulled a chair over without asking and sat down next to him, looking at his screen. For the next 40 minutes they worked through the revision together, her catching 2 things he'd missed, him catching 1 thing she'd gotten wrong on a load path, the 2 of them falling into a rhythm that had nothing to do with titles or org charts, and everything to do with 2 people who were good at the same difficult thing. At some point her shoulder brushed his, reaching for the mouse, and neither of them moved away from it as fast as either of them would have a year earlier. "Can I ask you something?" Cole said, somewhere in the middle of that 40 minutes, not looking up from the screen, the way people ask the real questions when they're looking somewhere else. "You can ask. I get to decide if I answer." "Fair." He paused. "Do you ever take a weekend off? An actual one, not working from a different chair?" Claire was quiet long enough that he thought she might not answer at all. "I used to," she said finally. "I had someone I used to spend them with. That was all. No name, no story, no further explanation." And Cole understood, without being told, that this was a door cracked open, exactly as far as she intended to crack it, and not 1 inch further. He didn't push. He'd learned over 3 years that pushing on Claire's doors only made her find new ones to close. "What happened?" he asked anyway, gently, because some part of him couldn't help it. "He got an offer somewhere better. Claire said, and it turned out the offer included a better version of his life too. One without me in it. She said it flat, almost bored, the tone of someone describing weather in a city she didn't live in anymore. Then she stood up, took her mug, and said something about needing to finish a budget report before Monday, and the door she'd cracked open clicked shut again, before Cole could say anything that might have mattered. He sat there for a long moment after she left, the column spacing forgotten, turning her sentence over in his mind. A better offer. A better version of his life. Both of them landed somewhere uncomfortably close to the message, still sitting unanswered in his phone. He went home that night and read Owen Pratt's message again. Then he read it a third time. Then, before he could talk himself out of it, he typed back 4 words. Sure. When works for you. He told himself it was just coffee. He told himself a lot of things that fall, most of which were true on their own and dishonest together. They met on a Wednesday, a coffee shop 2 blocks from Halcyon's building, far enough from Bennett and Associates that nobody from the office would walk past the window by accident. Owen Pratt turned out to be younger than Cole expected. Easy smile, expensive watch, the kind of confidence that came from never once doubting he'd land whoever he decided to go after. I'll be straight with you, Owen said, sliding a folder across the table that Cole didn't open yet. We've got a project coming up, downtown waterfront, the kind of build that ends up in magazines. We need a lead designer who can actually execute, not just talk about it. I think that's you. Lead designer, Cole repeated. At Bennett and Associates, he was 4 years into a senior drafter title that should have changed 2 years ago and hadn't, mostly because Claire kept saying next quarter and meaning it every time, and the company kept hitting next quarters that didn't have room for raises. Lead designer, Owen confirmed, with a number attached to it that I think you're going to like a great deal more than whatever you're making now. He slid a second piece of paper across the table, a salary figure circled at the top, and Cole looked at it the way you look at something that rearranges the furniture in your head without asking permission first. It was close to double what he made now. I'd need some time, Cole said, which was true, and which was also the kind of sentence a person says when they already know which way they're leaning and are only buying themselves room to feel less guilty about it. Take all the time you want, Owen said, standing, shaking his hand with a grip that felt rehearsed, but not too much. Good offers don't sit around being polite about it. Cole walked back toward his own building with the folder under his arm, and for the first 3 blocks he felt almost nothing but the clean, simple math of it. Double the salary, a title that matched the work he'd actually been doing for 2 years, a waterfront project with his name attached to the lead line instead of buried in a credits page nobody read. Then, somewhere around the 4th block, with the Bennett and Associates building coming into view, he thought about a Saturday afternoon coffee placed on the corner of his desk without being asked, and a sentence said in a hallway about pointing at things that deserved it, and a single cracked open door that had clicked shut again before he could see all the way through it. He put the folder in his desk drawer when he got back, underneath a stack of old drawings, and did not tell a single person it existed. It stayed there for 11 days. In that time, nothing about the office changed on the surface. The mixed-use project moved into construction documents. Claire ran her Monday meetings the same way she always had. Sharp, fair, occasionally almost warm, in a way she still seemed embarrassed by afterward. Cole kept bringing her coffee, milky before 2, black after, and she kept thanking him without quite looking at him, like the dance floor had taught them both a new kind of careful. But underneath the surface, something had shifted, the way the ground shifts before anyone above ground notices the cracks starting to run. On the 12th day, Dana from the front desk, who handled half the firm's paperwork and gossiped about the other half, mentioned offhand to another assistant, in the break room, in a voice that did not carry quietly enough, that Halcyon Design had been making calls around the industry trying to poach senior staff from 3 different firms downtown. Claire was refilling her coffee 12 feet away. She heard every word. She didn't say anything. She filled her cup, screwed the lid back on, and walked back to her office at her usual pace, and nobody watching her would have guessed that anything had changed at all. But that night, alone in her office long after everyone else had gone, she opened the firm's internal staff directory and looked, for a long, quiet minute, at Cole Hendrix's name, before closing the laptop and sitting in the dark with her hands folded in her lap, very still, the way a person sits when they are trying not to feel something they already know they are about to feel anyway. Owen Pratt did not wait quietly. 3 days after their coffee, He texted again, friendly and unbothered, the way men like him stayed friendly, right up until the moment friendliness stopped working. Just checking in. Still very interested. Let me know if you want to come see the waterfront site, no commitment, just so you can picture it. Cole stared at the message in the parking garage before he'd even made it inside the building that morning. He typed 3 different replies and deleted all 3. In the end, he sent nothing, which Owen would later tell him, with a small laugh, was the most common response he got from people who already knew what they were going to do and hadn't admitted it to themselves yet. That same week, Liam Carter cornered him by the printer, holding a stack of warm paper he didn't actually need. "You've been weird," Liam said. "Weirder than the usual weird." "I'm not weird. You left a meeting yesterday to take a call in the stairwell. Nobody takes calls in the stairwell unless it's their doctor, or their lawyer, or someone they don't want anyone in this office to know about." Cole pulled his pages from the printer tray a little too fast. It was a permit office. Nothing exciting. "Sure," Liam said, in the tone of a man who didn't believe a word of it, but had decided, for now, to let it go. Then, quieter, with none of the usual joking in it, "Look, whatever it is, I'm not trying to get in your business, but if it's about leaving, I'd think hard before you do anything. This place isn't perfect, but Claire's the kind of boss people spend a whole career looking for and never find." "I never said anything about leaving." "You didn't have to," Liam said, and walked off before Cole could decide whether that landed as a warning or an accusation. Cole went back to his desk and sat there for a long while without opening the file he was supposed to be working on. He thought about the folder still buried under old drawings in his bottom drawer, the salary figure circled in blue ink, the title that matched what he already did every day without the title attached to it. He thought about how easy it would be to say yes, and how that ease scared him almost as much as it tempted him. He thought, too, about Claire's voice in the hallway. "You've gotten better every year you've been here. I should tell you that more," and the particular weight of a sentence that cost someone like her more to say than it would have cost almost anyone else in the building. He didn't go see the waterfront site, not yet. But he didn't delete Owen's number either, and some quiet, honest part of him understood that the not deleting was its own kind of answer, even before he was ready to say it out loud. A week later, Claire called a short staff meeting on a Thursday afternoon, the kind that usually meant nothing more than scheduling updates, and Cole sat near the back, half listening, half still turning Owen's offer over in his mind, like a coin he couldn't decide whether to spend. Near the end of the meeting, almost as an afterthought, Claire mentioned that she'd heard a rumor going around about another firm trying to recruit staff out from under several companies downtown, Bennett and Associates possibly included, and she wanted everyone to know that if anyone had questions about their growth path here, her door was always open. No judgment, no hard feelings either way. She said it lightly, almost too lightly, the way people say things that actually matter a great deal to them while pretending the opposite. Her eyes moved across the room as she said it. They landed on Cole for exactly 1 second longer than they landed on anyone else. He looked down at his notebook and did not look up again until the meeting ended. That night, he sat in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before driving home, the engine off, the folder from Halcyon sitting unopened in the passenger seat, where he'd brought it that morning, without entirely admitting to himself why. He thought about Claire's eyes catching his for that 1 extra second, and the careful, almost pleading lightness in her voice when she'd said her door was open. He didn't know yet that the door she meant, and the door he was about to walk through, were not the same door at all, and that choosing one was going to mean closing the other, whether he meant it that way or not. He went to see the waterfront site on a Saturday, telling himself it was just curiosity, the kind of harmless looking a person does before they've made any real decision. Owen met him there in person. No folder this time, just the open lot and the river beyond it, and a hand sweeping across the view like he was selling more than a building. 22 stories, Owen said. Glass curtain wall facing the water. Public plaza at street level. The client wants something that ends up on postcards. That's the kind of project that makes a career, Cole. Not many people get handed one of these before they're 40. Cole stood at the edge of the lot, looking out at the water, and let himself imagine it the way Owen wanted him to. His name on the lead line, his ideas not filtered through someone else's signature before they reached a client. It was a good kind of imagining. It felt like standing at the top of a staircase he'd been climbing for years without anyone telling him he was close to the top. I need a decision by the end of next week, Owen said. Gentler than before, but firm underneath the gentleness. We've got 2 other names on the short list if this isn't the right fit. I'd rather it be you, but the seat won't stay open forever. Cole drove home with the river still in his head, the size of the project, the size of the number attached to it, and underneath all of that, quieter, the size of what he'd be leaving behind. He did not call Owen back that weekend. He spent most of it not sleeping well, turning the decision over so many times it stopped feeling like a decision and started feeling like a weight he was just carrying around now, permanently, whether he chose or not. Claire noticed the not sleeping before she understood the reason for it. He came in Monday with the kind of tired that sat behind the eyes, and she clocked it the way she clocked everything, filed it away, didn't comment, because commenting on an employee's tiredness wasn't something the boss in her allowed, even when some other part of her wanted to ask if he was all right. That same Monday, an email arrived in the firm's shared project inbox, the one half the staff had access to for scheduling site visits, and it was not meant for Claire's eyes at all. It was a calendar invite, forwarded by mistake from an assistant at Halcyon who'd attached the wrong recipient list, titled simply, Hendricks, Onboarding Discussion, with a meeting room booked for the following Thursday, and Owen Pratt listed as the organizer. Claire saw it because she happened to be the one covering the shared inbox that week while Dana was out sick. She read the subject line twice before she understood what she was looking at. Then she read it a third time very slowly, the way you reread a sentence hoping it will rearrange itself into something less painful if you just give it enough chances. It didn't rearrange itself. She closed the email without forwarding it, without replying, without telling a single person what she'd seen. She sat at her desk for a long while after that, very still, her hands folded in front of her the way they'd been folded that night 2 weeks earlier, when she'd looked at Cole's name in the staff directory and felt something crack quietly somewhere underneath her ribs. She did not confront him that day. She told herself it was because she wanted to be sure, wanted to give him the chance to come to her first, wanted to be fair about it. Some of that was true, underneath it, in the part of her she rarely let speak out loud. She was afraid that confronting him would only make it real faster, and some childish, unguarded piece of her wanted to live one more week in the version of events where it wasn't happening yet. So instead, she changed, in small ways nobody but Cole would have noticed. She stopped sitting next to him during late afternoons working through revisions. She started reviewing his drawings line by line before they went to clients, something she hadn't done since his second year at the firm, back when he was still learning the difference between a load-bearing wall and a decorative one. She was sharper in meetings, not cruel, never cruel, but precise, in a way that felt like armor going back on a body that had only just started to take it off. Cole felt the shift immediately. He didn't know the cause of it, only the shape, the way you know a room has gotten colder before you find the open window. "Did I do something?" he asked her on Wednesday, standing in her office doorway with a set of drawings she'd marked up with more red ink than she'd used on his work in over a year. "You did excellent work," she said, not looking up from her screen. "I'm just doing my job. You haven't reviewed my drawings like this since I started. Maybe I should have been doing it the whole time." Her voice was even, professional, the kind of even that takes real effort to maintain. Standards slip when people get comfortable. I'd rather catch it now. It wasn't true, and some part of him could hear that it wasn't true, but he didn't have the missing piece to understand why, so he took the marked-up drawings back to his desk and told himself it was nothing personal, even as it felt, very specifically, like it was. He almost told her about the offer that week, twice, once standing outside her office with his hand actually raised to knock, the words half-formed in his mouth, before a call came in for her, and the moment closed itself like a door he'd been too slow to walk through. The second time was at the end of a Friday, the office emptying out around them, and he opened his mouth to start the sentence, and she beat him to speaking first, asking about a permit deadline, and the sentence he'd been building died somewhere behind his teeth. He told himself there would be another moment. He was wrong about that, though not in the way he expected. Owen's deadline arrived on a Thursday. Cole sat at his desk that morning with the offer letter open on his second screen, the formal version now, signed where Owen had signed it, waiting only for Cole's name beneath it. The number on the page had not changed. The title had not changed. Everything about it was exactly as good as it had been the day Owen first slid a folder across a coffee shop table. What had changed was harder to put into words. It lived somewhere underneath the number, in a coffee mug placed on the corner of a desk without being asked, in 11 words said in a hallway that cost more than they should have. In the half-second a hand had stayed against his chest on a dance floor neither of them had mentioned since. He printed the letter. He told himself he was just printing it to think it over more clearly on paper, the way some decisions need ink and not just a screen to feel real. He told himself a lot of things that Thursday, most of which were attempts to delay the same conclusion he'd already reached, somewhere quieter than his conscious mind. By the end of the day, he had decided. He would tell Claire himself, in person, not by email, not through HR, not through some second-hand rumor she'd have to piece together from a misdirected calendar invite the way she actually already had, though he didn't know that yet. He owed her that much, after 3 years, after every coffee and every red mark, and every door cracked open exactly as far as she'd allowed. He folded the letter, put it in his bag, and told himself he would do it first thing Monday morning, calm, professional, the kind of conversation two adults could have without anything breaking. He had no idea how wrong that plan was about to turn out to be. That weekend, Dana, back from being sick and catching up on the shared project inbox, mentioned to Claire, entirely without malice, entirely without knowing what she was handing over, that she'd seen the calendar invite mix-up from earlier in the week, and assumed Claire had already dealt with it. Dealt with what? Claire asked, very carefully. The Hendricks onboarding thing, from Halcyon. I figured you'd talked to him already, since you would have seen it before I got back. Claire's face did not change. That was the thing about her that nobody in the building had ever fully learned to read, the stillness she could hold over the top of almost anything, but something in her chest went very cold and very loud at the same time. The confirmation of a thing she'd already known but had been allowing herself, for one more week, to half believe might not be true. I'll handle it, she said, and went back to her office, and closed the door, and sat there for a long time without turning on the lights. Monday morning arrived faster than either of them wanted it to. Claire did not sleep well that Sunday night. She lay awake long after the apartment had gone quiet, staring at the ceiling, and let herself remember, just once, just for a few minutes, the last time someone had handed her a folder like the one she now knew was sitting in Cole's bag. Derek had not even waited until they were home to tell her. He'd told her in the parking lot of the restaurant where they'd just finished celebrating his promotion, the new title, the new city it would require, the new life he'd already decided to want more than the one they had together. He'd used the word transition, a transition period, he'd called it, like leaving her was a stage of construction instead of a decision. She had not cried in that parking lot. She had not cried at the apartment while he packed 3 boxes over 2 weekends. She had gone back to work the following Monday and run a client meeting so flawlessly that one of the partners had complimented her composure afterward, not knowing that composure, for her, had stopped being a choice somewhere around year 2 of the marriage, and had simply become the only shape she knew how to hold. Her father had died 8 months after the divorce was final, a heart that had been failing quietly for longer than anyone realized. A Tuesday morning, a phone call from her mother that she still, even now, could not fully remember the words of, only the sound of the kitchen tile under her knees when her legs stopped holding her up. She had been back at her desk by Thursday. People in the office still talked about that, in the careful, half-admiring way people talk about things they don't fully understand, how strong she was, how nothing seemed to touch her. They never asked what it had cost to build a version of herself that nothing could touch, because asking would have required noticing that there was a cost at all, and Claire had spent 4 years making sure nobody noticed. Cole was the first person in all that time who had noticed anyway. Not by asking the right questions, she'd never have answered those. By paying attention to the things she didn't say, the coffee, the drawer she kept closed, the way she went quiet, not sad quiet but braced quiet, every single time someone in the office mentioned a colleague taking a job somewhere else. She understood, lying there in the dark on Sunday night, that this was exactly why Cole's leaving was going to hurt more than Derek's ever had, more than made any sense for a man who was, on paper, only her employee. Derek had taken a marriage from her. Cole, without ever meaning to, without either of them naming it out loud even once, had been quietly building the first thing in 3 years that had made her feel like the cold front around her chest might someday be allowed to thaw. And now he was leaving too, following the exact same shape, a better offer, a better version of a life that didn't have room for her in it. She got out of bed near midnight and sat at her kitchen table, with a blank legal pad in front of her, the kind she used for drafting difficult emails, the kind of correspondence that required getting the wording exactly right before anyone else saw it. She wrote 3 different versions of what she might say to him Monday morning: professional and detached, warm and understanding, something in between that tried, and failed, to sound like it didn't matter to her either way. She tore up all 3 before sunrise. In the end, she walked into the office Monday with no script at all, which was, for a woman who had spent 4 years controlling every variable she could reach, the most frightening decision she had made in longer than she could remember. Cole arrived 20 minutes after she did, the letter folded in his bag exactly where he'd left it Thursday, his plan still intact in his head. Calm, professional, a conversation 2 adults could have without anything breaking. He had no idea she already knew. He had no idea how little of the conversation was going to go according to either of their plans. He knocked on her door at 9:15, the letter in his hand now instead of his bag, his heart doing something loud and unhelpful in his chest that no amount of rehearsed calm could quiet down. "Do you have a minute?" he said. Claire looked up from her screen, and for just a moment, before the composure slid back into place, something raw and unguarded moved across her face, there and gone so fast that if Cole hadn't already spent 3 years learning to read her, he might have missed it entirely. "I think I already know what this is," she said quietly. "But come in anyway." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, the click of the latch unusually loud in the silence that followed, and neither of them said anything for several seconds, the letter sitting folded in his hand like something neither of them was ready to let exist out loud yet. "You don't have to know what it is," Cole said, finally, his voice rougher than he meant it to sound. "Let me just say it. I saw the calendar invite," Claire said, "the one that got forwarded by mistake last week. Onboarding discussion. I've known for 6 days, Cole. I just didn't know how to bring it up without it sounding like I was angry. Because I'm not angry. I don't have any right to be angry. You don't owe me your career. Claire, I'm saying this badly." She stood up from behind her desk, came around to the front of it, leaned back against the edge with her arms crossed, a posture that looked like control, and was, underneath it, the only way she could keep her hands from shaking. "I practiced this. I wrote it out 3 times last night and tore all 3 up because none of them sounded like me. They sounded like someone trying very hard to be fine about something." Cole set the letter down on the corner of her desk without opening it, without handing it to her, the same corner where he'd set a coffee mug down for her on a Saturday afternoon weeks earlier. "I haven't signed it," he said. "I printed it Thursday. I was going to talk to you first, in person, before I did anything. That was always the plan. It doesn't matter when you sign it." Claire's voice cracked, just slightly, on the word sign, the first crack he had heard in it in 3 years of working for her. "It matters that you're going to. Isn't it? The offer's good. I'm sure it's good. Better title, better money, a project that'll actually put your name on something instead of mine." "It's not about. It's exactly about that," she said, sharper now, the anger arriving the way it always did for her, fast and clean, and easier to hold than whatever was underneath it. "And it should be. I should be happy for you. Any decent boss would be happy for you right now, telling you to go, telling you that you've earned it, that this place was never going to give you what you deserved fast enough, and you shouldn't wait around for it to. Then why don't you sound happy for me?" Cole said quietly. The question landed somewhere it wasn't supposed to. Claire opened her mouth to answer it the way she'd answer any other question in this office, fast, composed, redirecting before anyone got close enough to see what was actually underneath the words. Nothing came out. For the first time in longer than either of them could remember, the composure simply did not arrive when she called for it. "Because I'm not happy," she said, and her voice broke open on the second word, no longer careful, no longer professional, no longer anything close to the woman who ran Monday meetings without raising her voice. "Because every single person who has ever told me they had a better offer somewhere else has walked out a door and not come back, and I am so tired of being the place people leave from." The room went very quiet. Cole did not move. He had spent 3 years learning the shape of her silences, but he had never once heard her say anything close to this raw, this unguarded, and some part of him understood, standing there, that he was watching 4 years of careful architecture come apart in real time. "My father built this firm and then died before he got to see what I'd do with it," Claire went on, the words coming faster now, like a dam that had given up trying to hold anything back. My husband left the week I needed him most, and called it a transition. I have spent every single day since then making sure nobody in this building could see how much that cost me, because if I let one person see it, I was terrified I'd never be able to put the door shut again. She stopped, took a breath that shook visibly on the way in. And then you started bringing me coffee, she said, quieter now, the anger draining out of her voice and leaving something far more exposed underneath it. And you noticed things nobody else noticed. And you crossed a room at a wedding because you saw I was drowning and nobody else did. And I let myself believe, just a little, that maybe I didn't have to hold this door shut forever. Cole's chest had gone tight, in a way that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. And now you're leaving too, Claire said, just like everyone else. And I have absolutely no right to ask you to stay, because you've earned this, every bit of it, and a good person would let you go without saying any of what I'm about to say. She looked at him then, and for the first time in 3 years, there was nothing held back in her face at all. No boss, no armor, no carefully measured distance. Just a woman who had spent 4 years convincing an entire company she didn't need anyone, standing 6 feet away from the one person who had finally made her doubt that. Please don't leave me, she said. Not us, not the firm, not the team. Me. The 2 words sat in the air between them, undeniable now that they'd been said out loud, impossible to take back, impossible to pretend hadn't happened. Cole felt something crack open in his own chest, something he'd been keeping carefully shut for 3 years for entirely different reasons. Professional ones, reasons about boundaries and titles, and the simple fact that you did not fall for the person who signed your paycheck. He did not say anything for a long moment. He could not have, even if he'd known what to say. His hand was still resting on the letter on the corner of her desk, the offer that had felt, 2 days ago, like the top of a staircase he'd spent 4 years climbing. It felt, right now, like nothing at all, paper and ink, and a number that had suddenly lost all the weight it used to have. Claire, he started, and then stopped, because he didn't trust the next word that wanted to come out, didn't trust himself to say it without it sounding either too small or too enormous for the moment they were standing in. Claire's face had already begun closing back up, the composure starting to crawl back into place the way it always did when she'd given more of herself away than she meant to, a kind of self-protective retreat that happened almost on its own, like a hand pulling back from a stove before the brain had even registered the heat. You don't have to say anything, she said, turning back toward her desk, putting distance between them with the same efficient motion she used for everything else. Forget I said it. It wasn't fair of me. Take the offer, Cole. You'd be a fool not to, and I'd never forgive myself for being the reason you didn't. I'm not going to forget you said it, Cole said. I'd rather you did. I'm not going to forget it, he said again, firmer this time, because it's the first true thing either of us has said to each other in 3 years, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen just because it's inconvenient for both of our job titles. Claire's hands, gripping the edge of her desk, went very still. Then what are you going to do about it, she said, and the question came out smaller than anything he'd ever heard from her. None of the boss in it at all, just a person, frightened, waiting. Cole picked the letter up off the corner of the desk. He did not hand it to her. He did not tear it up either, not yet, not in this room, not in this moment that felt too large and too fragile to make a decision inside of. I don't know yet, he said honestly. I need to think, not about the money, about what I actually want, separate from being afraid of either choice. It was not the answer Claire wanted. It was, she understood, watching him fold the letter back into his pocket and walk toward the door, the only honest one either of them had a right to expect from the other, after 4 years of 2 people who had both gotten very good at not saying what they meant. He paused at the door, hand on the handle, and looked back at her. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I've never once thought of this place as somewhere I was waiting to leave. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him exactly the way it had clicked shut when he'd walked in, and Claire stood alone in her office, with her heart still beating too hard, and a sentence hanging in the air that neither of them had answered. She did not cry. Not yet. She sat back down at her desk, opened the budget report she'd been pretending to work on for a week, and stared at the numbers without seeing a single one of them, the words "please don't leave me" echoing in a part of her chest she had thought, until about 4 minutes ago, was permanently locked. Down the hall, Cole sat at his own desk with the letter back in his bag and did not open a single file for the rest of the afternoon. Liam asked him twice if he was all right. Both times, Cole said he was fine, and both times it was, very obviously, a lie. Neither of them spoke to each other again that day. The office closed at 5 with the two of them still in their separate corners of it, the unresolved weight of the morning sitting between their two doors like a third presence neither of them was ready to name. The rest of the week passed in a strange, careful distance neither of them tried very hard to close. Claire kept her door open during business hours, the way she always did, but she stopped finding reasons to walk past Cole's desk, and he stopped finding reasons to walk past hers. They spoke when work required it, polite, professional, two people performing normalcy, with the precision of architects who knew exactly how much weight a structure could bear before it gave way. Cole met Owen Pratt again on Wednesday, this time at Owen's own request. A short call that Cole almost didn't pick up. "I need an answer by Friday," Owen said, no longer quite so easy in his tone, the patience of a recruiter, who had already spent more time on one candidate than his quarterly numbers liked. "I think you're the right fit, Cole, but I've got a board that wants this seat filled, and I can't hold it open on a feeling forever." "I understand," Cole said. "I'll have an answer for you." He hung up and sat in his car in the parking garage, the same spot he'd sat in 2 weeks earlier, turning the offer over like a coin, except the coin felt different now, heavier on one side in a way it hadn't been before Monday morning. He thought about the number on the page. Still very good. Still more than fair for the work he did. He thought about the title, lead designer, the kind of line on a resume that opened doors for the rest of a career. He thought, too, about a sentence that had not stopped echoing in his chest since Monday. "Please don't leave me. Not us, not the team. Me," said by a woman who had spent 4 years making absolutely certain nobody ever heard her ask for anything. He thought about what it would mean to walk away from that sentence in pursuit of a better title. He thought, with equal honesty, about what it would mean to stay in a job for a feeling instead of a future, and whether that was wisdom or simply fear wearing a kinder name. He didn't have an answer by Wednesday night. He didn't have one by Thursday either. Liam noticed the quiet differently than he'd noticed the earlier distraction, less like curiosity now and more like concern. "Whatever it is," Liam said, dropping into the chair across from Cole's desk Thursday afternoon, dropping the joking tone entirely. "You don't have to tell me, but you look like a man carrying something heavy enough to need 2 hands, and you're only using one." "It's complicated," Cole said. "Most things worth deciding are." Liam leaned back. "For what it's worth, and I say this as someone who's watched this office for 4 years, I've never seen Claire Bennett look the way she's looked this week. I don't know what happened between you two, and like I said, none of my business. But whatever decision you're sitting on, I don't think it's only about a job title anymore. Don't pretend it is just because that's the easier math to do." Cole didn't answer that, mostly because there was nothing to say that wouldn't have given away more than he was ready to give away. Not even to a friend. Not yet. Not before he'd said it to the person it actually belonged to. Claire spent that same week in a quieter kind of unraveling, one she kept entirely behind her own closed door. She caught herself, twice, reaching for her phone to text Cole something work-related, only to delete the message before sending it, recognizing it for what it actually was, an excuse to hear from him, dressed up as a project update. On Thursday evening, alone in her office after everyone else had gone, she opened the bottom drawer of her desk and looked, for the first time in longer than she could remember, at the photo she kept turned face down. Her father, younger than she remembered him being, standing in front of the building that had put his name on the map, smiling the kind of smile that had nothing to perform for and everything to be proud of. She picked the photo up and looked at it properly, for the first time in 3 years, instead of carrying its weight without ever facing it directly. "I built it bigger," she said quietly to the empty office, to the photo, to nobody at all. "I just don't know if I built anything inside it that's actually still alive." She put the photo upright on her desk instead of back in the drawer, a small thing, the kind of thing nobody else would have noticed walking past her door, but the first small thing in 3 years that felt like a window cracking open instead of a door clicking shut. Friday arrived, with Owen's deadline sitting over the whole day, like weather nobody could quite see, but everyone could feel. Cole came into the office early, earlier than usual, almost as early as Claire herself, and found her standing by the window in the main hallway, looking out at the city the way she sometimes did before the rest of the staff arrived, the one window in the building tall enough to see the river from. He stood beside her without saying anything for a long moment, the two of them watching the same gray morning light come up over the same skyline that held both their futures somewhere inside it, undecided, still being drawn. "I haven't given Owen an answer yet," he said finally. "You don't owe me one either," Claire said, not turning to look at him, her voice steadier than it had been Monday, the kind of steady that had clearly cost her some effort to rebuild. "I shouldn't have said what I said. It wasn't fair to put that on you while you're trying to make a decision about your own career." "It wasn't unfair," Cole said. "It was the truest thing you've ever said to me. I just didn't know how to answer it in the moment without it sounding too small or too much, and I still don't, completely. But I know I'm not ready to give Owen an answer until I figure that part out first." Claire finally turned to look at him, something cautious and unguarded both moving across her face at once, the way hope looks on someone who has trained themselves for years not to expect it. "Then figure it out," she said quietly. "Take whatever time you need. I'll still be here either way." It was, for both of them, the closest thing to an honest truce either had managed to offer the other since Monday morning. Two people standing in a hallway with a window full of undecided sky between them, neither one ready yet to say the last thing that still needed saying. Cole called Owen Pratt that same afternoon. "I appreciate the offer," he said, standing on the building's back steps where the cell signal was clearest, his free hand pressed flat against the cold metal railing, like he needed something solid to hold on to while he said it. "I mean that. It's a good project, and you made a strong case for it. But I'm going to stay where I am." Owen was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that meant he was recalculating something on his end, deciding whether this was worth one more push. "Can I ask why?" Owen said finally. Not unkindly, more curious than anything. The number was good. The title was real. Most people don't walk away from both of those without a better number or title waiting somewhere else. Cole looked back toward the building, toward the window 2 floors up where he knew Claire's office sat, the light already on even though it was barely past noon. "There's something here I'm not finished building," he said. "It's not on a resume anywhere. I don't think it would make sense to anyone but me, but it's the reason, so it's the honest one." Owen let out a short laugh, more impressed than annoyed. "Fair enough. Doors open if that ever changes." "It won't," Cole said, and found, saying it out loud, that he meant it more than he expected to. He went back inside, and did not go straight to Claire's office. He wanted to, badly, the pull of it sitting in his chest like gravity, but some part of him understood that this particular conversation deserved better than a hallway interruption between meetings, deserved space, deserved a moment that wasn't competing with anyone's calendar. He waited until the end of the day, until the office had mostly emptied out, the way it always did on Fridays, people leaving early for whatever weekend plans pulled them out the door faster than usual. He found Claire exactly where he expected to find her, not in her office, but out on the small concrete balcony attached to the 3rd-floor break room, the one nobody else really used, the one with a view of the same river Owen had tried to sell him on a vision of 2 weeks earlier. She was holding the photo from her drawer. She'd brought it out here, apparently, set it on the railing in front of her, looking out at the skyline her father had helped shape, decades before either of them had been born. "I declined the offer," Cole said, stepping out onto the balcony beside her. Claire didn't turn right away. "You don't have to tell me that like it's a gift. You should make decisions for yourself, not for me." "I am making it for myself," he said. "That's the part I needed the week to figure out. It would have been easier to tell myself I was staying because of guilt, or obligation, or because Liam guilted me into it in the break room, which, for the record, he absolutely tried to do. But none of that's actually true. I'm staying because somewhere in the last 3 years this stopped being a job I show up to and started being a place I actually want to be, and a person I actually want to see every morning when I walk in. And I didn't let myself say that part out loud until you said yours first." Claire finally turned to face him, the late afternoon light catching the edge of her face in a way that made the careful composure she'd worn for 4 years look, for just a moment, like something she was choosing to set down rather than something that had simply failed her. "I scared myself, saying what I said Monday," she admitted. "I haven't asked anyone for anything in 3 years, not since Derek, not since my father. I built an entire version of myself that didn't need to, because needing things felt like handing someone a door they could walk out of whenever they decided to." "I'm not Derek," Cole said quietly, "and I'm not going anywhere." "I know that now," Claire said. "I think some part of me has known it for a while. I just didn't trust myself to believe it. because the last 2 times I believed something like that, I was wrong, and being wrong cost more than I knew how to survive again. She picked the photo up off the railing and looked at it once more, her father's smile catching the same afternoon light that was catching her own face now. And then, gently, she set it back down, facing outward this time, facing the city instead of facing away from it. He used to say the best buildings are the ones that bend a little in the wind, instead of trying to stand perfectly rigid against it, she said. I think I forgot that for a while. I think I built myself like a building that refused to bend and called it strength, when really, it was just fear, wearing better posture. Cole stepped closer, close enough that the space between them stopped being professional distance and started being something else entirely, something neither of them needed to name out loud anymore. For what it's worth, he said, I think you're allowed to bend a little. I'm not going anywhere when you do. Claire looked up at him, and for the first time since the dance floor, weeks earlier, in front of 40 co-workers and a band that didn't know it was playing the soundtrack to something neither of them had been ready for yet, she let herself reach for him without waiting to be rescued first. Her hand found his, fingers lacing through fingers, steady in a way that had nothing left to prove. I'm sorry it took me so long to bend, she said. You're early, actually, Cole said. Most people take a lot longer than 4 years to let someone see the parts they keep face down in a drawer. That earned a real laugh from her, the kind he'd heard exactly once before, on a dance floor, surprised out of her like it had been waiting a long time for permission. The sound of it settled something in his chest that had been unsettled since the moment Owen Pratt's first message had landed on his phone weeks earlier. They stood on the balcony a while longer, not saying much else, watching the river catch the last of the daylight. Two people who had both spent years building careful, well-engineered distances around themselves, finally letting one wall come down without either of them rushing to put it back up. Monday morning, the office returned to its usual rhythm. The kind of ordinary that meant nothing dramatic had visibly changed and everything, underneath the surface, actually had. Claire was at her desk by 7, the way she always was. Cole brought her coffee at 9, the way he always did, milky, because it was still morning. But this time, when he set the mug down on the corner of her desk, she caught his hand before he could pull it back, just for a second, just long enough to say thank you, in a way that had nothing to do with the coffee at all. Liam noticed, of course. Liam noticed everything, eventually, and made absolutely no effort to pretend he hadn't, grinning at Cole across the office with the smug satisfaction of a man who had called it months before either of them had been ready to admit it themselves. He didn't say anything out loud, not in the office, not where anyone official enough might overhear. He just gave Cole a single, knowing nod over the top of his monitor, the kind that said I told you so, without spending the breath to actually say it. Dana, who had unknowingly started the whole second half of the story with one offhand sentence in a break room, never did find out just how much weight that sentence had carried. She went back to managing the front desk and the shared project inbox, blissfully unaware that her small mistake had cracked open a door that had been sealed shut for 3 years. The firm kept its name carved into the glass at the entrance. Bennett and Associates, her father's company, her company now, still standing, still growing, still occasionally bending in a wind it had once tried far too hard to stand rigid against. Some afternoons, when the office had mostly emptied out and the light came in low and gold across the drafting tables, Claire would find an excuse to walk past Cole's desk, and he would find an excuse to walk past her office, and neither one of them needed the excuse anymore. Not really, but they kept making them anyway, small and unnecessary and entirely theirs, the kind of habit two careful people build when they've finally decided that staying is worth more than any number a stranger could circle on a page. She still kept the photo on her desk, facing outward now, facing the room instead of away from it, and on the rare Friday when the office played music again, for another colleague's celebration, another excuse for 40 people to stand around clapping in a circle, Claire no longer froze when someone called her name. She just looked across the room first, found the one person who had taught her that being pulled towards something didn't always mean she was about to lose it, and walked onto the floor on her own 2 feet, steady, unafraid, already reaching for his hand before the first chord even finished playing. It did not happen all at once, the way the better stories like to pretend these things happen. There was no single dramatic morning when Claire Bennett stopped being careful and started being entirely open instead. Trust like that does not arrive on a schedule. It arrives in small deposits, made over weeks, until one day a person notices the balance has grown larger than they expected. 3 weeks after the balcony, Cole asked her to dinner, properly, outside the building, away from coffee mugs and red-marked drawings and conference rooms full of investors. He picked a small place 2 streets from the office, nothing fancy, the kind of restaurant where nobody would think twice about a boss and an employee sharing a table, because nobody there had any idea who either of them was. Claire showed up 12 minutes early. She would later admit this was unusual for her, since punctuality had always been a tool she used to control a room before the room could surprise her, and arriving early for dinner with Cole had nothing to do with controlling anything. She simply hadn't been able to make herself wait any longer at home. "You look nervous," Cole said, when she sat down across from him. "I am nervous," she said. "I haven't done this in 3 years. I'm allowed to be bad at it for a while." "You're not bad at it. You're just out of practice. There's a difference." She smiled at that, the smile that still surprised people who only knew Ice Marin from conference rooms, and reached for the bread basket between them, mostly so her hands would have something to do. Dinner went the way good dinners go when 2 people have already done the hard, frightening part of saying the true thing out loud and are only now getting around to the easier part of simply enjoying each other. They talked about things that had nothing to do with the firm. Cole told her about growing up the youngest of 4 brothers in a house where dinner table conversations were closer to competitive sport than conversation. Claire told him, for the first time, about her father's habit of sketching buildings on restaurant napkins, dozens of them, stacked in a shoebox she still had somewhere in a closet she hadn't opened since the funeral. "I should look through it sometime," she said. "I never have. I think I was afraid of what it would feel like, seeing all those unfinished ideas he never got to build." "Maybe I could help," Cole offered. "Not to fix anything, just so you're not doing it alone." Claire looked at him for a long moment across the table, the candle between them throwing soft light across both their faces, and felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't felt settled in a very long time. "I'd like that," she said. They opened the shoebox together 2 Sundays later, sitting on the floor of Claire's apartment with napkin sketches spread out across the carpet between them. Decades of half-finished ideas her father had never lived long enough to draw properly. Some of them were brilliant, some of them were strange, the kind of sketch that only made sense inside one man's head. All of them were, in their own way, a small unfinished conversation Claire had been carrying around for 3 years without knowing how to continue it. "This one," Cole said, holding up a napkin with a rough sketch of a curved facade, half the lines smudged from age. "This is almost exactly the shape of the waterfront site Owen wanted me to build on." Claire took it from him and studied it for a long moment, something thoughtful moving across her face. "What if we built it?" she said. "Not for Halcyon, for us. Bennett and Associates could put in a bid on that project. We have the team. We have the talent." She looked up at him. "We have you." Cole felt something warm move through his chest at the word, us, the way she'd said it without hesitating, without the careful distance she used to put around anything that asked too much of her. "That would mean going up against Owen's firm directly," he said. "He's not going to take that well." "Owen Pratt can take it however he wants," Claire said, a small, sharp confidence returning to her voice, the kind that had built an entire company and kept it standing through years that should have broken it. "I built this firm out of my father's napkins and 4 years of refusing to fail in public. I think we can build one more building out of them too." They put together the bid over the following month, working evenings and weekends that no longer felt like avoidance, the way Claire's late nights at the office once had, but instead felt like building something together on purpose. Liam joined the pitch team once he found out, mostly because he refused to be left out of what he loudly called, to anyone who would listen, the most obvious office romance turned business power move he had ever witnessed in 4 years of paying entirely too much attention to other people's business. The presentation took place on a Thursday morning, the same kind of glass-walled conference room where Claire had once given Cole's brickwork pattern credit in front of a room of investors who had no idea what they were watching unfold underneath the architecture talk. This time she did not present alone. She and Cole stood at the front of the room together, trading the explanation back and forth, the way 2 people do when they've spent enough late nights together that finishing each other's sentences has stopped feeling like a trick and started feeling like the truth. They did not find out the result that day. These things take weeks, sometimes months, decisions made by committees who move at their own slow pace, regardless of how much weight any one person is carrying while they wait. Claire and Cole went back to the ordinary rhythm of the office in the meantime: coffee at 9, red ink on drawings that had long since stopped needing quite so much of it, small, unnecessary excuses to walk past each other's desks that had stopped being excuses at all. The call came on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after the pitch, while Claire was reviewing a budget report at her desk, and Cole was 3 doors down arguing cheerfully with Liam about a structural detail neither of them would admit. Later, they'd actually agreed on the whole time. Dana put the call through with the breathless energy of someone who already knew, somehow, before anyone official had told her, that this particular call was the kind worth running across the office to announce. Bennett and Associates had won the waterfront contract. Claire walked out of her office holding the phone still in her hand, and the whole floor went quiet for a second, the way a room goes quiet right before it understands what it's about to celebrate. Then someone, probably Liam, started clapping, and within seconds the whole office had joined in, 40 people on their feet in the same kind of circle that had once made Claire freeze solid on a dance floor weeks earlier. This time, she did not freeze. She crossed the room straight to Cole, who was already moving toward her, and the two of them met somewhere in the middle of the noise and the clapping and the late afternoon light coming gold through the windows, and for once, in front of every single person who worked for her, Claire Bennett let someone see exactly how happy she was, without holding a single piece of it back. "We did it," she said, half laughing, half something closer to tears she didn't bother hiding. "You did it," Cole said. "I just helped hold the door open." "No," Claire said, taking his hand the way she had on the balcony, steady now, sure of it in a way she hadn't let herself be sure of anything in 3 years. "You're the reason I finally let it stay open." The building broke ground the following spring, 22 stories of glass curtain wall facing the river, a public plaza at street level, exactly the way the client had wanted, a project that would, eventually, end up on the kind of postcards Owen Pratt had once promised Cole on a different firm's letterhead. But it was not Owen's name on the lead line. It was Bennett and Associates, her father's company, carried forward by his daughter and the man who had crossed a crowded room 3 years earlier because he could not stand to watch her drown alone. Some nights, working late on the project together, Claire would catch herself looking at Cole across a drafting table and feel, instead of the old fear that this too would someday walk out a door, a quiet, steady certainty that some things, built carefully enough, were made to last. She kept her father's photo on her desk from that day forward, facing outward, facing the room. And whenever music played in the office again, for a wedding, a promotion, any small excuse the staff found to gather and celebrate something, Claire Bennett no longer waited at the edge of the room. She walked straight onto the floor, found Cole's hand without needing to be rescued, and danced like a woman who had finally, fully, stopped being afraid of being loved out loud.